Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to our session on measuring the impact of a large international industrial energy efficiency program. For those who were in the keynote in the morning, I think this is a good continuation of a concrete sectoral example of industry. I'm here with my colleagues Marco, Christine, and John, who will be introduced a little bit later and who will have interesting presentations for us. Maybe as a matter of housekeeping, for those who are new, please ask your questions not using the raising hand function, but using the Q&A function. You can also, if you wish to discuss with peers and colleagues of the conference, you can do that in the discussion forum, but we will not see those questions. So if you have questions for the presenters, then please ask them using the Q&A button of your screen. If you see a very small picture, then use the enlarged screen section for having a better view of the slides that we are going to present. With that, I think we can move into the topic. There is not much I have to say as a matter of introduction, only to remind you that the industrial sector is of course key for achieving climate change targets. Maybe I forgot to mention I'm Johannes Dobinger. I work at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, leading the independent evaluation division there. And there is a lot of projects and programs that try to promote industrial energy efficiency that land on our desk and that we evaluate. And that is what we are going to use as an example now. And so I move on to the first speaker, who is my colleague Marco Matteini. Marco Matteini holds a degree in electrical engineering, and he has been a program manager with UNIDO for a long time, managing industrial energy efficiency programs. He's also part of ISO technical committees on energy management standards, and he has done managed technical cooperation programs in many countries as diverse as South Africa, Russia, Macedonia, Georgia, Colombia, and Cuba. With that, I would like to pass the floor to Marco. Please, Marco, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for joining this session today. My presentation will focus on measuring energy performance at the industrial facility level. A bit of background to my intervention. In this slide, you can see an overview of the UNIDO Industrial Energy Efficiency Program, which over the last decade has been operational in 27 countries. The main donor supporter of this program has been the Global Environment Facility within its climate change mitigation focal area. So the ultimate objective of this program was to reduce energy consumption in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, we aim to reduce cost for industrial enterprises on energy and deliver also additional socioeconomic benefits. Over the past years, a number of bilateral donors have also supported the program, and more recently, the European Union and the Green Climate Fund. The program has had a specific focus on selected best available technologies for energy efficiency in industry, and on the top, energy management systems in line with the 50,001 has been the common thread, I would say, through the vast majority of country projects. Here you have a summary of some of the results achieved, but for the sake of time, I will leave it to you for consideration later. A bit of context. Now, the target of all industrial energy efficiency project of UNIDO is to improve energy management and energy efficiency behavior of companies. This both at the level of practices and investment decision. The goal is reduce energy consumption, CO2 emission, and generate money savings. However, when we want to achieve industrial energy efficiency at scale, and also we want to support creation of markets for industrial energy efficiency, the equation gets a bit more complicated, and there are many elements that come into play, which are highlighted here. Now, within the UNIDO technical cooperation projects, we usually have activities also at various levels, and we try to make a positive contribution. However, the focus of my next slide is going to be the energy performance at facility level. Now, if we want to look at this, we have to bear in mind that energy consumption in industry depends on a technology element, on a people element, which in UNIDO's experience is still significantly neglected. But at the end, is people that operates equipment, system, and process, and people are making most, if not all, the decisions within a company. Another element is data, which is still largely unutilized within the industrial sector for energy performance improvement purposes. And last but not least, we have the driving factors. Those factors like production or weather that are causing energy consumption. Now, if we want to look to improving energy performance in industry and to assess energy performance, we need to take into account, we have all this in our considerations. I'm going now to show a real-life case study for a brewery factory within one of the UNIDO project. But I want to start by saying that within the 10 years experience of our program, the UNIDO findings show that the methods and indicators used by the vast majority of companies are not good. Actually, very often they are misleading. In this specific case, the top management of this company in 2012 had hired a new energy manager, and they had also allocated, approved €500,000 of energy efficiency investments for 2013. Now, when at the end of 2013, went to assess the performance of industry. Now, one of the pictures that the company saw was the graph number 1, which shows the total electricity consumption of the plant. The red line is the baseline consumption that was set, and the blue one is the actual electricity consumption, which at the end of the year was 23% lower. Now, is this a good performance? Probably for the accounting or finance manager of the plant, it was. Was it also more energy efficient? That we cannot say it. Now, in this sector, the indicator, the measure to assess energy efficiency is the amount of energy consumed for producing 100 liters of a product, quite often referred as specific energy consumption. Now, using this indicator to assess performance, the plant in 2013 was 3% worse than in 2012. So the new energy manager, those €500,000, apparently did not generate any return. However, if using the same data, we would use a different method based on regression analysis, the result that we would get would be significantly different, and precisely the company had improved by 3%. Now, the difference between the graph number 2 and graph number 3 is that in number 3, the method can take into account the fact that the company is consuming energy also when there's no production. By simply reflecting this aspect, we are getting completely opposite assessment of energy performance and energy efficiency improvement. Now, in this sector, weather is also a driving factor. I mean, in brewery, there is a significant amount of energy consumed for refrigeration, and this refrigeration consumption depends on the outdoor temperature. Now, if we take into account also the weather and we normalize for the different weather condition between 2012 and 2013, well, the plant had in reality achieved a 10% reduction in their energy consumption, or if you want, they had improved their efficiency by 10%. Now, we don't have time to discuss what are the implications at decision-making level, but I think that you can also infer yourself some of the more critical ones. Now, within the UNIDO global program, we have consistently promoted and supported a transition and adoption of these more advanced and precise methods for assessing energy performance, which are really needed if we want to achieve sustained continual improvement of energy performance. For your information, the last version of ISO 50001, the International Standard on Energy Management System, has introduced a requirement to normalize energy performance indicator and energy baselines. A final point that I would like to make is that when we look at energy performance improvement, energy efficiency in industry, it is not something related only to technology replacement or process upgrades. Now, in this bar chart that you have in front of you, you have the total annual electricity savings for 9 companies that implemented energy management system within the UNIDO program in 4 different countries and from 5 different sectors. Now, the blue bar is showing the share of electricity savings that were achieved through projects, through technology replacement and alike measures. The green bar shows the share of electricity savings measured at the end of the year that could not be tracked back to the projects implemented. Now, these green savings are the results of energy management system implementation. These are the results of or related to training people, doing a better use of data, and improving and adding organizational and management measures related to energy. So to conclude, the challenges that we have seen, and actually we still see, unfortunately, for better assessment of energy performance in industry, there is very limited expertise on best practices within the companies, and there is still a limited expertise and experience in the service market for most countries. The existing practices in the accounting and finance department of companies are a barrier where companies belong to corporates. Internal reporting and benchmarking practices are also representing a hurdle, resistant to organizational change. Data is an issue in less cases than what one would expect, in particular in small companies. And last but not least, we have legislation and policies. A number of country legislation and policy have set targets using certain metrics that are then trickling down to the enterprises. And these external requirements are also making a bit more complicated a transition towards better practices. Now, it is already quite complicated to assess energy performance within a facility where almost everything is within the control of the owners. Things are getting even more complicated when we step out of the facility and we need to aggregate the savings, the performance of different companies from different sectors, and also when we have to move towards the country level to look into the results and impact of government policies. So this is going to be even more complicated, and I will pass on the floor to Johannes and John for dealing with this aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marco, for a very interesting presentation. We have already a couple of questions coming in at this stage. Let me inform you that after we end this session, there will be a short break, and then there is an informal discussion forum that is planned between, I think, 12:30 and 1 o'clock. And Marco will be in that forum, available also to answer your questions real time. So if you're interested in a discussion with Marco, then please join that session. But there will be others as well, so I encourage you to join it in any case. Good. So I see that Simon has asked a question. I'm not sure if Marco can see that question. There are two questions actually. One seems to be better suited for the discussion forum at the end, and one is about, if I understand it correctly, energy consumption as a ratio of unit productivity. Can you say something on, yeah, Marco is back on the stage. Do you want to say something on that now, or?
Thank you, Johannes. On the second one, I'm not sure I got the question is related to the use of ratio as an indicator for energy productivity. Sorry.
Can you see the question, or can you not see
it? No, I'm sorry, at the moment.
Okay, you don't see it. Can you say anything about, very difficult to see here.
Okay.
Anything about,
now I see.
Are you looking at it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Regarding, yes, the productivity, unity productivity, we are not looking at the marginal energy cost versus productivity. This we usually leave it to the companies. I mean, our main goal is to reduce energy consumption under equivalent, let's say, conditions. So trying to take into account what really drives the performance. On the, let's say, if I can use the expression, more economic side of assessing performance, we usually do not, or at least we have not yet worked, because also usually the enterprises are a bit more concerned about confidentiality and the commercial value of information. However, a ratio, if we're talking productivity, could have less, let's say, negative implications than using it as energy efficiency performance indicator. So in general, I think the indicators discussion should be also placed within the context of the intended use of the indicator. So what the indicator has or is supposed to measure.
Okay, I would suggest we leave it like that. Thank you, Marco. And there will be at the end of the session, I hope, enough time for more questions and answers. And let me now move on to our next presenter, who is John Newman. He is a Paris-based independent consultant focusing on energy efficiency, climate change mitigation, and industrial technology and policy issues. He has conducted research for UNFCCC, for the International Energy Agency, OECD, and so on. And prior to being an independent consultant, he worked also in the International Energy Agency Secretariat, specializing on energy efficiency, and also in the US Office of Technology Assessment. Good to have you, John. Thanks for joining. And without further ado, I would pass the floor on to you.
Thank you, Johannes. So I'm going to describe the independent impact evaluation of the office programs that Marco just described. This evaluation was done with Christine, myself, and some other staff at Christine's office in Berlin. So the evaluation had several key evaluation questions that we were supposed to look at in looking at this portfolio of projects at UNIDO. We were supposed to look at how changes in policies, technology management practices, financing, and other behaviors actually affected energy efficiency in industry, mainly through mainstreaming and scale up and replication. We're supposed to draw out lessons for future projects and future impact evaluations. We were supposed to examine the company selection strategy used in choosing pilot projects, and to examine how energy efficiency services actually can be sustained after the projects themselves actually ended. So we were tasked with looking at a range of projects. They actually initially spanned 3 offices within UNIDO: the Industrial Energy Efficiency Office that Marco just described, the Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Office, and a couple of projects from the Ozone Depleting Substance Office that were very energy efficiency focused. But ultimately, we just ended up focusing on those in Marco's division, Industrial Energy Efficiency, which in those projects, they tended to focus on really two main avenues of improving efficiency. One, the implementation of energy management system standards, and also systems optimization like steam optimization, steam system optimization, compressed air optimization, pumping systems optimization, that sort of thing. It's key at this point to mention that most of these interventions tended to be no cost or low cost, and that had actually implications for other parts of the project. We looked at 16 projects in these countries that you can see listed on the slide. They were all initially completed or recent completed projects that ran from 2011 to 2018. And they typically were 5 to 7 years in duration, and they typically cost the donor $2 to $5 million US, and those costs accounted for about 20% of the total project cost after you included co-funding from organizations within the countries themselves. We used a variety of evaluation techniques to understand the program itself and reconstruct a theory of change map. These involved interviews and with project managers and others. We also examined project documents and evaluations. We did barrier analysis that looked at things like affordability and awareness and expertise barriers. And we also conducted within this larger evaluation 4 terminal project evaluations on the programs in Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, and Thailand. And then to estimate the impact of the program itself, we used data analysis of ISO 50001 certifications. We used data from the terminal project evaluations I just mentioned. We did an expert survey. We did intervention context mechanism outcome approach analysis and a qualitative comparative analysis. So these programs that Marco described are actually, at least in my opinion, very complex. They involve a significant degree of awareness building, setting up information networks for resources, setting up peer-to-peer networks, recognition programs, training for experts in industry and in the service supply sector, independent analysis, independent experts. They worked with the finance community to do various things, and they worked heavily with the government and standards community. And so it was a challenge when reading all the project documents to sort of bring all this together into this reconstructed theory of change map, which I will explain as quickly as I can. On the left side are all the UNIDO project inputs, the ones that I just mentioned, the training programs, the working with governments, etc. Across the top, you see the outcomes, intermediate outcomes that ultimately lead towards the right to impacts. And ultimately, we would like to have come up with a number and estimate for the net impacts on the right side of the chart. So the programs tend to work in 2 major pathways. One, a replication pathway, which is essentially a capacity building pathway where they work with factory staff, independent experts, finance, and government people. And then the second one, which is up on top, they actually do pilot projects that ultimately raise the awareness throughout the country of the value of these various types of interventions. in addition, the pilots themselves save energy and reduce emissions, so they have that extra additional benefit. So UNIDO did a lot of training for factory and management staff and independent experts. They range from 1 and 2 day initial trainings, and then from those they identified some people that might be candidates for longer term, many month-long expert trainings. They worked with the finance community to raise financing awareness and how to evaluate energy efficiency projects in terms of funding requests. They worked with governments and the standards community to work on general policy issues. They helped create links between ministries that may not have been talking and communicating well with within the energy efficiency context. They raised the profile of energy efficiency within the high levels of government. They worked on benchmarks, policy frameworks, you name it. It really depended on the country and the country context. The pilot, but a great deal of resources went into the pilot projects, and these are where they actually tried to implement with lots of UNIDO guidance, systems optimization and energy management systems within pilot enterprises. They also used this as a training program for the experts that were trained that I mentioned earlier. They would do a lot of some of their work in the pilot enterprises, and then in these examples you could actually find direct net effects, because in most cases the projects were well monitored and the results were available. And then, but a major part of working with pilot enterprises is the pilot enterprises are supposed to, tell the rest of the world what they're doing and promote the idea, and that was less clear on actually how much that happened. So the major evaluation challenge came into the broader adoption of all of these techniques. UNIDO went and they trained lots of people. They did lots of awareness raising, and that was all fine and good. But from an evaluation standpoint, it's challenging to figure out how that actually worked out into the broader adoption of these techniques, either within other company groups, within supply sector chains, and the broader industrial sector. So just a quick look at what we found, that oops, I lost it. The projects did increase overall company awareness. They did increase the use of systems optimization approaches. They did increase the trust in energy management systems, but they didn't. It's less clear whether there was any widespread replication. In the finance community, the results were even less. Well, they were fairly clear that there wasn't an increase of funding from commercial banks, in part because most of the techniques that were involved were low cost and no cost and really didn't need that much funding. Sometimes the analysis did indicate did reveal side projects that might need funding, but that wasn't a major part of it. And in general, their work with UNIDO's work with the government agencies did increase the infrastructure for implementing ENMS and audits and energy efficiency in general, but wasn't clear, how it would be sustained in the future after UNIDO closed its country or its project office for this particular project. With that, I'll stop and turn it over to Johannes and Christine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for this interesting overview of evaluation and the method and the findings. I think we can now, as this your presentation is very much related to the one that we will get from Christine now, we might as well go directly into the next very brief presentation, and then we go to question and answer. Let me use this space to say that we were thinking that it would be a good idea to not only use the Q&A text function, but also give the stage to some of the participants to ask their questions directly. Technically, that is possible. We've seen interesting questions like the second one, more generic one that Simon asked, and Olivia has asked a very interesting question on how to deal with the specific conditions that influence energy efficiency when trying to come to overall sectoral findings. So these are questions, if you could, if you agree, we would give you the stage to participate more directly after Christine's presentation. If you're fine with that, then please let us know with a brief OK in the Q&A function. Okay, with that, I would say let's move on to Christine. Christine is an experienced evaluator in energy matters and climate change related interventions. She's running her own consultancy, Arepo Consult in Berlin for the last more than 10 years. And before, she was the head of the renewable energy division of the German Energy Agency, and she also worked for the Global Environment Facility as program manager before. She has a Bachelor of Science in Economics and a Master in Geoecology, and a PhD in Geography. Christine, with that brief introduction, please take the stage.
Thank you, Johannes, much appreciated. I was, as John mentioned already, the team leader of this evaluation, and I was very much, it was, as John also mentioned, pretty challenging, but also a very good experience to work very closely together with Marco and his colleagues, who constantly are attempting to measure the results of their programs, but as Marco pointed out, encountered challenges on many levels, not only on the direct level in the companies, but also, as John then pointed out, on the effectiveness and impact of the capacity building oriented measures that is the bulk of the work of the UNIDO industrial energy efficiency programs. So a major gist of our evaluation was not only finding out what were the direct or indirect impacts, but also finding out whether they are even measurable or whether there's even a robust qualitative assessment possible of whether there is a positive impact or not. And in our evaluation, we encountered all the challenges that John talked about, which led us to coming up with a dynamic design. We were almost on a quarterly basis, a quarterly interval, adding new evaluative tricks and methods to our way of assessment. Ultimately, we ended up using a realist evaluation approach for determining the robustness of the findings that John had listed. But we also included a systematic review of a large number of terminal evaluations of these projects. And we then also went to find completely independent data to use them for triangulation. But ultimately, we capitulated basically in relying on the internal measurements and monitoring system of the projects, and went in and raised funds, resources from UNIDO programs to do a cross-project survey that then gave us more of a comparing view across all projects that were participating in the survey. So I prepared for you a summary of 5 sets of evaluation challenges that we encountered. And rather than going into each and every one of them, I would suggest that I just highlight quickly the challenges and our solutions that we found to it, and then open it up for your questions and dig only into those that you might find interesting. So ex ante, we didn't know how good the data quality would be. And actually, we also didn't quite exactly know or understand how many projects of the UNIDO portfolio would participate in our evaluation. When the evaluation was originally designed, we actually did not want to include only the programs and projects of the IEE portfolio, but there are 2 other portfolios within UNIDO that are also working on energy efficiency. And for the first round of our evaluation, we actually also looked at projects from the ODS program of UNIDO, as well as from the resource efficient and cleaner production arm of UNIDO. So you can imagine that all the difficulties that John was talking about were compounded by having 2 other programs with somewhat different but also somewhat comparable theories of change also alongside with it. So we ended up using only IEE programs because they were more developed and had a deeper focus on energy efficiency. But planning was not something that we were able to do in the beginning, but rather we went through ongoing adjustments in the evaluation methodology. While all these projects were doing more or less the same, with some emphasis on one aspect or another, they still did not use the same indicators or the same indicator definitions. We tried for a short time to retrofit indicators to that, but then, as I said, moved on to do a completely new cross-project survey to get comparable data between the projects. We then wanted to get at portfolio level findings and information, and we tried a qualitative comparative analysis, but this was not possible because we did not find a decent and usable indicator for the project success. What we did then use was realist synthesis on a qualitative level with the ICMO methodology, which stands for Input, Context, Mechanism, and Outcome. And I'm more than happy to talk a little more about that if you want me to. Beyond the indicator definitions, there were also just not necessarily the same terminology were used between the projects. Sometimes output and outcomes were used differently in different contexts. So the same indicator was defined as an output in one project or an outcome in another. And this was mitigated by us through simply a lot of work. But the last and most important challenge was this question that John pointed out, to measure soft results, measure structural change, and measure after project evaluation, replication results. So we had to move for a lot of these things to qualitative assessments, and also triangulated with macro data. For that, of course, a better remedy would have been to do post-project evaluations with access to individual companies and some self-reporting included. That was the last thing that we were not able to actually do in this evaluation, because at that point the evaluation manager was already on our backs and said, well, now you really need to come to a close, which is what I'm going to do with this presentation now and hand over to Johannes.
Christine, also for being very brief, which gives us another 15 minutes for the Q&A session. A very interesting summary of the challenges faced, which is not really new for me as a professional evaluator also, and neither was it for you probably, but it is a very interesting case. And there are very good questions that have come in, and given the fact that we are not such a large crowd, we tried to make it a bit more lively, asking those who are very good questions to join us here. And we have here Olivia Reiterman. Is that spelled well?
Yes, very well pronounced. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, Olivia, here. Now that we have you face to face, can you please ask your questions to the speakers?
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the panelists for your presentations. I guess my first question was directed to Marco, but I think it makes sense to expand it to Christine as well. Christina, as part of the challenges, you mentioned it was difficult to find, to synthesize portfolio level findings, considering it was not possible to find a reasonable single indicator across all industries, which was related to my question to Marco, which was around considering that energy efficiency is best tracked by taking into account sector-specific and plant-specific aspects such as activity levels and other contextual factors. What would be the best approach to evaluating programs? So I'd be really curious about hearing more about the ICMO approach that he used instead. And I had one more sort of philosophical question directed to John and to all of you for that matter, which is around the challenge that John alluded to around tracking, finding evidence of replication as part of the programs. And I think this, as an evaluator, I look a lot into innovation programs, and replication is a key element of all of those. And it's a common theme that's a really hard one to find evidence of impact for. So my question is more around what do you think are the theoretical pathways for replication, and how can policymakers build into the design of these programs measures that will ensure that these pathways will result in will be followed, and it will result in replication effects. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. Who wants to go first? John, Marco, Christine? I think Marco was addressed first. So
yeah, maybe, but please cut me off when.
Okay, I will do so.
No, I mean, Olivia raised a very good point, where I would say I don't have a single answer. Maybe based on my knowledge at the moment, what I would regard as the best tool available to make comparisons between companies, and therefore with an opportunity to also aggregate, is the Energy Star Energy Performance Indicator scheme, which is a benchmarking scheme, which is capable of taking into account also, for instance, the weather condition of the company's location. And they are taking also into account some of the driving factors, the activity level and other issues. I would then just simply add, as an example, I'm working in North Macedonia and in Georgia, where maybe there are between 3,000 to 10,000 businesses in the manufacturing sector. Let's say you may have 1,000 to 2,000 companies. Well, there are probably 10 companies or 5 companies that they account for half of the total industrial energy consumption. If we go to Ukraine, maybe that number goes to 100 companies accounting for 50 to 70% of the total country energy consumption. Germany has 44,000 large companies. I think that from a policy perspective, where there might be opportunity for improvement is actually what Christina was mentioning, but maybe better planning, defining better what is really the target of the programs, and maybe consider some differentiated approaches. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. John?
Yes. Regarding replication, I would say building in 3 factors. One is building in factors with the pilot projects that you engage with, and make it known that you expect them to report back in after the project is complete on a periodic basis of, you know, how the original projects, what the energy savings from them have been, and also what new projects have been undertaken, and do it, I don't know, yearly or biannually or something like that. The same with the experts. A lot of resources are put into training experts, months and months of training, and do the same with them. Make it clear that you expect that they you know, check back in every now and again with evidence of, you know, whether their business is going well and how many implementations they've actually done. One place I went actually had a sort of, you know, after project party for everybody to get back together and talk about, you know, what they had been doing in the last years. It was sort of a networking event. And then the last thing I would say is make sure early on in the project that you expect that the elements of the project have a home in the government somewhere afterwards. That when the project office closes, that all of the information dissemination and other activities that the project had been engaged in have a home in the government, and it's supported. And that in one case happened at basically the midterm review level. They had already started planning for which agencies were going to take up which elements of the program. So I would say those 3 things.
Thanks a lot, John. And thanks, Olivia, for the good question. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of time for us to go into what would follow now normally, which is an interesting discussion to go deeper. I have another set of questions here. Let me, instead of bringing people to the stage, ask Christine directly. There were some questions related to theory of change, ICMOs. Could you, and you've seen them, so could you briefly address those?
Yes, thanks, John, and thanks, Leanne, for bringing this back onto the screen. There was one question about transformational change, and this is what we did for including transformational change in the theory of change. And we were building on a framework that I had developed earlier, which is called the theory of no change, which is a structuralization of the possible barriers that could prevent any of the stakeholders that we have included in our theory of change from acting the way we want them to act. So prevent financiers, for example, here on the right side, from financing for energy efficiency, or prevent technical services and equipment supply chain from providing technical services and equipment. This can be read up in the literature, and we did this for each and every one, and this was the basis actually for including transformational change in that theory of change that John showed you, and I'm more than happy to talk about this a little more because this is one of my pet projects and programs. So what we then did is we converted these kind of statements, basically a statement that UNIDO project outputs would help the service and supply chain to offer services, which then would lead to broader adoption of energy efficiency practices within companies. We converted this into ICMO statements, and we formulated a total of 7 such statements. At some stage, we also included gender in our very dynamic way of responding to these challenges in the statements here. And I actually copied the gender statement for you. I can't leave my, okay. So that you can see the type of statements that we use to understand then whether or not this was happening in the projects. So we had a variety of gender-related inputs, and you can do the same for supply chain related inputs. So a first possible gender-related input is that UNIDO implements gender sensitivity in its own projects and promotes gender awareness among training participants and its outreach activities. So we had a number of different possibilities what UNIDO could do to further gender. And then the mechanism would be that these inputs sensitize stakeholders to see the importance of gender equality in EE. Very idealistic, but that's what we postulated as a mechanism. And the outcome of this input and this mechanism would be, for example, the introduction of tools and mechanisms to support women, i.e. gender-sensitive planning of trainings, advertisement campaigns to encourage female in the workplace, and so on. So we hypothesized that there would be, in this case, about 8 different types of outcomes that would be gender-related. And then with these hypotheses, we analyzed our terminal evaluations and our project information about whether or not there is evidence for any of these inputs leading through these mechanisms to the outcomes. And this is how we were able to come up with robust statements on the findings. Back to you, Johannes.
Thank you so much, Christine. And now we have another participant joining us, Simon Stromberg, who had asked a very interesting question on why industry in general is performing so badly on industry assessment. Simon, yeah. I'm afraid we have only 1 minute left.
Yeah.
So there will probably be no room for an answer.
No.
But if you can ask the question, you can then take it up in the discussion forum in 15 minutes. Yeah. Please.
I'll phrase it as a comment then. I think you know, I've spent 25 years in the industry, oil and gas. I basically left because I decided I couldn't make any impact on renewable energy or energy transition doing the job I was doing. And what's really interesting is that some of the techniques talked about just really aren't talked about. So I went back to school and started, you know, thinking about things like exergy. How much energy do you actually need to use? What's the minimum energy you need to use to actually do the job in hand? So it feels to me like, and I understand, and the presentations are really interesting. I understand you're trying to educate people, but it still feels like there's a real lack of skills and ability to look at energy efficiency properly, particularly using some basic principles like exergy. And I think my comments are that pretty much industry doesn't do anything unless it's regulated. And in the oil and gas.
Sorry, I think, Simon, I'm very sorry, but I'm afraid in 45 seconds we will be cut off completely. I'm supposed to give a couple of final remarks.
That's fine.
Maybe thank you very much for this interesting problem statement, I would say.
Yeah.
And let's take it up in the discussion forum that follows. Thank you so much. It was good to have you all. Please make use of the recordings that are being done from all these sessions and right up to the energy evaluation newsletter if you haven't done so you can be on top of all that is happening in terms of news. Thanks for having joined. Thanks, John, Christine, and Marco for your good presentations, and thanks for the organizers.
Thanks to you, Johannes, for the moderation. And I was very happy to be part of this panel.
Thank
Me
you
as
very
well.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to the attendees. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.